Okay, it's ready. So good morning, everyone. We are happy to welcome you to our webinar on circular cities, and thank you for joining in these turbulent times. We will quickly move to the presentation of Max, and then we'll be answering some of your questions. But beforehand, I would like to give the floor to a representative of the Dutch Embassy in Kiev, Ukraine, Deputy Head of the Economic Department, Mr. Ernst Brosman, for the welcome word, and we are thankful for their support of this event. Please, Ernst.
Thank you very much, Roman. Very happy to be here in the so many of our webinars together. I think today we're touching a very important topic with a very good speaker today. I think most of us are probably calling in from cities today. I'm here calling in from Podil, Kiev, and cities really are the center of human activity. I've been told that over half of the world's population is living in cities at the moment, and that in the coming 20, 30 years, we expect that it will be closer to 2/3 of world population that will live in cities. And also most of our money is earned in cities. And because of this and this growing importance of cities, we need effective management to help manage this rapid growth of cities, because we do face a lot of societal and environmental challenges that come with living in cities. Some of them we already see today, some of them become a lot bigger in the coming years. And in this aspect, circular living, a circular society makes a big difference. And in cities where people live together in such a relatively small space, we really create pools of innovation and collaboration. And this provides for ideal ecosystems to create circular solutions to these problems that we might face. So we have to transition into a circular future. It's a very complex process, but we need it to build a healthier, more resilient future, and changing the city into a better place in the global context. So we have new circular materials, technologies, business models, and collaborations. And these have the potential to transform every element of the urban system. And we should use the possibilities we have to fully accelerate the process of this transition. So I'm very happy that today we have Max Russell from the Circle Economy from Amsterdam. I think he's calling in from the UK today, so also working on distance. And Mr. Russell, he will gladly share all his expertise with you about the showcases and practices that are currently being applied in the Netherlands. So not to keep you waiting any longer, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you. And I would happily give the floor to Max. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Brosman. Thank you all. Well, yes, exactly. Max Russell, project manager for Cities program in Circular Economy, the world's leading organization that helps cities and regions to transition to circularity in a practical way. And we are happy you're here with us today. Please, the screen is yours.
Yes, well, thank you, Roman, and thank you, Ernst, for the introduction. And good morning or good evening or wherever anyone is zooming in from this. Well, for me, it's this morning. I'm really excited to be able to speak to you on this topic today. I hope everyone's doing well. Yes, as briefly introduced, I work for Circular Economy, and we're a social enterprise based in Amsterdam. And we work with cities and businesses to accelerate the practical transition towards a circular economy. So today I'm really excited to be able to share some of our insights that we've been working practically with cities to help accelerate a transition towards a more circular economy. And I'll just introduce kind of the growing need of this transition towards a more kind of green and resilient future, particularly within our cities. So without further ado, 2020 is probably a year that most of us would want to forget quickly. It's been a year that's really been defined by crises, a huge number of crises, not to mention health crises. The pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, has touched everyone and every kind of part of life throughout the world. It's really unprecedented scale of this crisis. But what started as a health crisis has also transformed into an economic crisis, with businesses having to shut down and change the way that we're doing business. I'm working remotely, and I'm sure everyone is often more working remotely. But shops and retail have had to shut their doors for a long time. So we're only just beginning to see the start of this economic crisis as well. But all of this has been happening within the context of ecological crisis. Increasingly, there's growing concerns and growing protests, most specifically in relation to climate change and the climate crisis that we're facing as well. But we really are in a confluence of 2020 has been a year of these combined crises acting together. And as Ernst briefly framed as well, cities have been in the center of these crises, and they're the center of our human activity. More than half the world's population currently live in cities, and these are hotspots of human activity, both for the good. They really are hotspots of innovation and culture, and people love living in such dynamic spaces. However, in the face of our current situations and our current crises, they've also been the hotspot and the breeding grounds, for lack of a better word, of the COVID pandemic. It's been most profound in cities, and the stark contrast between people's experiences of the COVID-19 pandemic has been centered around cities as well. But then also, cities are also the hotspot and the driving force of our ecological crises as well. The same characteristics that make them dynamic are also the same characteristics that make them huge drivers of environmental damage as well. So through the consumption of resources and activities throughout cities, these are just a few facts that are on the screen as well, a few statistics about the huge influence cities have on our global ecological system, both in terms of carbon emissions. Cities are responsible for a huge number or the majority of carbon emissions, but also in the global consumption of resources as well as energy and as well as waste. 60 to 70% of waste is generated by cities. So these hotspots, these places that only take up 2% of the Earth's surface, are causing this huge, or have this huge impact in our global systems and our natural systems. And this 2020 has really shone a light on the fact that there are underlying challenges that are framed by our cities in terms of the vastly different experiences people have had in cities facing the COVID pandemic, but also the fact that our cities are driving such ecological damage. But to not kind of dwell on the negative, the COVID-19 pandemic has also brought about new understanding and new perceptions. It's really showed us as a global community that everything is very well interconnected, that something that started in one side of the world has spread, and through these kind of global interconnections has spread to the entire planet, for better or for worse. But it really has showed that we are all connected within this one system. So it's really brought about this new perception and new understanding about the Earth and the planet as a connected system, both in terms of natural systems, but also economic and social systems as well. And through this, the pandemic has really brought a new understanding about different values that have come to the surface, kind of reinstated importance on resilience and well-being. As I kind of touched upon a little bit earlier, people's experiences within cities have been vastly different, and it's really emphasized the importance of green space within cities, that someone's experience if they're living in the countryside is very different to if you're in the center of a city with no access to parks. And if you have to stay at home, then that's a very different perception. So people have really gained a new understanding and a new appreciation of nature and green space within cities, and the connection that we have with nature, and the need to kind of blur the boundaries between the built and urban world and more of the natural world as well. But it's also underscored an importance on resilience, that through the COVID-19 pandemic, it's kind of shown our global system to be quite fragile, as it were, that our overextended supply chains, disruptions through those have kind of very large repercussions and knock-on effects. So it's really emphasized the importance to have a more resilient economy and a more resilient system that maybe mimics more of the natural world, that takes inspiration from the natural world as well. But also, as a very positive note, or I find this quite inspiring, it's also shown that systemic change is really possible, and it can happen very, very dramatically. This is a picture of India before lockdown and then during lockdown, and it shows just the vast difference of the quality of air in the air within our urban systems. That's possible if there's enough motivation and impetus to inspire that change and drive that change. But I just want to touch upon the system a little bit that's driving a lot of our ecological crises. And the IPCC has declared that we only have about 10 years left to avert catastrophic climate change. So this systemic change is really, really demanded, and time is running out. But what is this system? It's how we define in this field is the linear world, our current linear world. And this is probably familiar to a lot of you, but it's where we take resources, we extract finite resources like fossil fuels and minerals and chemicals. We make things from it. We make cars, we make computers, we make buildings, we make chairs, everything that you use in our daily life. We use them. Now, especially for electronics, we use them only for a short time, a short period in their possible lifespans, and then we waste them, and we generate huge, vast quantities of waste through this linear system, and it ends up at the end of life sitting as a kind of inert material. So currently we extract over 100 billion tons of materials every single year, which is a figure that I can't really comprehend how just the sheer quantity of those materials, but it's a vast, vast sum of materials every single year. And only 8.6% is, after that year, is cycled back into our economic system. The remaining over 90% of the materials end up just as waste or dispersed into the environment. So this is as Circular Economy, we have an annual report which tries to understand the current level of circularity of the planet. And since we started doing it, this figure is actually decreasing. It started with just above 9, now it's going down to 8. So we're going in the wrong direction. And so it's a very, very stark picture, let's say. But then in contrast to this, and what I'm working towards as part of Circular Economy, and what we're here today is talking about something more inspirational, but it's the circular economy. So what is this circular economy? It's a different possible system to our current linear system. And it's not just a recycling economy. A lot of times I'm speaking to people, it's a common perception of the circular economy is recycling 2.0, which is, I think of recycling as more of an end of pipe solution. So it's cleaning up after a lot of the damage that's already been done. However, a circular economy is much more systemic. It's looking at the root causes of the problem and designing systems in such a way that waste isn't even factored into the equation as it starts. We design products and services and materials in such a way that they can be reused, recycled, and reducing overall consumption as well. So it goes beyond purely just recycling and trying to loop those materials that have been wasted, but it's trying to design out waste in such a way to have more regenerative systems. Now, it's been recognized that the circular economy has a huge amount of potential to be reaped if we pursue such a path. This is just for the European Union, but it has both in terms of its environmental potential, it has a huge potential to reduce carbon emissions, as well as reducing pressures on our natural systems in terms of reducing resource consumption. But it also has a bit more socioeconomic impacts as well in terms of the jobs. The circular economy can help create more jobs and new jobs towards the future in arguably more resource intensive fields as well. But then also in terms of economic value, that there's a lot of value from these resources that are just currently wasted that we can still capture and utilize within this system. And just to touch on a little bit more, framing it in relation to the huge challenge that we have in terms of climate change, one of the kind of more kind of internationally recognized challenges that we face globally. And this is an analysis that we did a few years ago that's showing to reach the 1.5 degree future that's been outlined and recognized internationally, our current national commitments as defined by the Paris Accord only get us so far, and there's still a gap. Whereas the circular economy, through resource recovery, shifting consumption patterns, circular design can help close that gap, more of an additionality to those national contributions that are more focused on energy systems. So it's a huge, there's a huge potential of the additionality of our circular systems as well to reach these international and crucial targets. So a little bit more on what is the circular economy. How we define it within circular economy is it has 7 broad elements that we classify. Some maybe you're more familiar with in terms of using waste as a resource. Others, and we like to really frame the more enabling side of it. So in terms of really thinking about the design and the collaboration and more smart city and digital technologies as well, which are very important to be able to enable using waste in a more efficient way, let's say. So in relation to cities, I'll just talk you through a few of these different examples of where it's been used in practice. So one maybe more familiar is using waste as a resource. And so a really great example that I love as part of the Netherlands, being in the Netherlands, is a space in Rotterdam, which is Blue City, which is this amazing, it used to be an old swimming pool and leisure center, maybe you can see in the background here. And it's been transformed. It was derelict and it's been transformed into this hub of circular innovation that's housing lots of small circular initiatives. And through this ecosystem, this small scale ecosystem, for example, there's a cafe housed within the Blue City, and the waste from the cafe, the coffee grounds, the waste coffee grounds from the cafe are being used by another initiative within that same ecosystem to grow mushrooms, oyster mushrooms from that waste. And those oyster mushrooms are then used in the cafe as well. So it's really trying to use those wastes and use those resources within that small scale ecosystem to create value within there. This can also be scaled up into a larger scale as well. So taking those principles of cycling these resource loops, different resource loops, can also be scaled up into a city level. So this is an example from Malmö in Sweden, where it's looking towards ideas of industrial symbiosis, where the waste and byproducts of certain industries are used as inputs of other industries as well. So you can imagine generating energy or the excess heat from certain industries are then being used and applied through district heating networks to heat up residential buildings as well, to reduce the demand of fossil fuels and energy like this. And this is waste that would otherwise just be wasted into the environment. Another really important element is prioritizing regenerative resources And this really links into what I was mentioning before about the importance of natural systems getting reintroduced into urban systems as well. So a cool initiative in Berlin, but also inspired by China as well, is this idea of sponge cities. So integrating green regenerative systems and green infrastructures within the urban environment itself, and designing our cities in a way that are green and they have these natural systems to be able to absorb excess or peak rainfall, to prevent flooding. But then also it provides a social impact as well, in that there's green space and it's much more of a beautiful place, especially in this COVID pandemic times where green space has become such a luxury for everyone. So really designing our cities in a way that are regenerative and integrating these natural systems within cities. But then also on the other side, it's looking at, it's rethinking the business model and looking at different ways of providing products and services to support the societal needs as well. So a really great example is this increase of the sharing economy, and Seoul is really championing this in South Korea, where they have a citywide initiative to support lots of sharing economy solutions. So the picture in the background is a bike sharing scheme that are in many different cities, but so goes beyond this, and it has tool libraries to share products and services, sharing different forms of mobility, but also sharing in terms of housing and having this intergenerational exchange of younger people living with older people in these community areas as well. And through these new business models, it's changing our perception with everyone needing a single product, which increases consumption, to a shared use of such resources that can reduce overall levels of consumption as well, and reduce the pressures that cities are putting on resource demands. But then a really important component as well is designing for the future. So really designing our urban systems and really reframing the way that we think about the needs that we have. So an example that I really love is in Paris, and Paris is really championing this concept of the 15-minute city. And it's changing the way they're designing their neighborhoods so that everything or all the basic and important services that someone would need are within a 15-minute walk from where they live. And so through this, if you're able to use non-motorized transport through bike lanes and walking, then it reduces the need in the first place of needing cars and fossil fuel based modes of transport. So it's not just electrifying the grid, let's say, which will still have a demand on the electricity needs, but it's changing the city in a fundamental purpose to really ask the questions of what do we actually need, or how can we provide such services that reduces the demand of certain additional resources. So this is a really amazing concept, and I think it's being taken on by different cities around the world as well. Just this real different perception of how do we design our cities to provide services without or changing that kind of fundamental need and fundamental provision of that need. So as I mentioned, this is just underscoring some of the kind of the broad benefits that a circular economy can bring to cities, both in terms of the environmental sense. It can improve air quality, reduce emissions, also in the social sense, creating jobs, and then also in the economic sense, really boosting competitiveness of a city through this kind of more localized innovation and resilient local economies. So throughout the world, a lot of cities are really recognizing the opportunities and the potential of a circular economy, but it's often a broad concept. And as I showed, it's quite a broad concept, and there's many different possibilities to start, and there's many different ways to apply the circular economy in a particular city. So at Circular Economy, we often get asked this question from cities who we interact with and we talk to, is it's all well and good, but how can I start my circular transition? And so the way that we work with cities is we've developed a process and a collaborative process to lead cities through the Circle City Scan. And it's where we take an overarching journey, collective journey, to take cities from orientation around what a circular economy means for their city towards the actual implementation of circular strategies as well. So I'll just take you through a little bit of what we do with cities on the ground on a day-to-day basis as well, to help really kickstart this circular transition. So these are just a few of the cities that we've been had the pleasure of working with, and it's been really amazing to see the circular economy as a concept kind of or having a bit of a cradle in Europe, but now we really see it spreading across the world into different continents, and we're working now in North America, but also into Asia to bring this concept to a lot of different cities. And of course, the concept needs to change and adapt to its local context. But it's a really, really exciting development over the past few years to see that recognition. So the scan, how we go about this journey is we divide it into key phases, and I'll take you through each of these phases. But it takes, you can imagine it almost like a funneling process, going from the big picture of what a circular economy is and what the city, what the context of the city is, all the way towards action planning, practical strategies, and trying to get them off the ground and tangible implementation. Now, each of these phases is kind of framed on a core question that cities ask us every time that we're working with them. So the first one in the socioeconomic analysis, the question usually goes, which sectors of my city have the greatest potential for circularity? It's very daunting to start implementing circularity with the whole city all at once. So what's often quite useful when we work with cities is to really understand where is the energy and which areas of the city have the greatest potential for circularity. So we do this through a socio-economic analysis, is where we use data and we paint a picture with data to really try and get an objective understanding of what the character of a particular city is. So we use, here, this is on the screen at the moment, is a showcase of some of the visuals that we create. And this is just highlighting different sectors in a city, from public services to industry to commercial services. And we use 3 different indicators to paint a bit of a high level picture, and indicators that are both economic, environmental, as well as social as well, just so we can get this high level sense of what the nature and what the character of a particular city is, to then try and see some hotspots for intervention. But what we also do as well is that in this first phase, it's really important to get the context and the culture of the city. So we do more of a political and historical analysis of what are the ambitions of a particular city. The real great thing about the circular economy, I find, is that it's additional. It can be additional, and it can support a lot of the ambitions that a city already has, including, this is, I believe, from the city of Prague, but their ambitions were to become a more beautiful city, a more creative city, a city that enhances social cohesion. And through this, then we can start framing and identifying together with city stakeholders, prioritizing different areas and different sectors of the city that we can then focus the transition on in the subsequent phases of the scan. And through this, we usually pick 1 to 3 focus sectors to really give as much energy as we can to these. Now, with the selection of those 3 or those particular focus sectors, then the question goes, okay, this is all well and good, but what's the current circular state of that particular sector? And where are there opportunities for the circular economy? So to do this, what we do is we look at the urban metabolism of a city. Now, you're probably all familiar, or you've probably heard metabolism in the context of organisms and people. We as people have metabolisms, and this is where we consume food and nutrients and energy and water. And this is processed by our body, and it goes to our organs, and these organs provide certain functions for our body. And then in the end, we produce waste as well. But we can also see an urban system, a city, as having a metabolism similar to us. So cities, they consume resources, And these resources serve particular functions and particular sectors to provide particular services, but then also the city provides waste as well. So what we do is we take a bit of an X-ray of this urban system, and we look at those resources that are being consumed using data that's available, and we classify and we identify the different types of materials that are being consumed. So the colors here on the left-hand side of this visual really relate to the types of materials. So is it metals? Is it biomass? Is it other minerals and chemicals? And we map these resources into where they go. So this is for the construction sector in the city of Prague. And we can see where those materials are going and which buildings these materials go towards, whether it's infrastructure or residential buildings, or even non-residential buildings as well. What we also do is we also then map the waste flows that come out of the city, again classified by that same amount. And then subsequently, we look at how those waste flows are getting processed by the city. Are they being recycled? Are they being landfilled? So through this X-ray, and similar to kind of take this metabolism analogy further, that if a person had a problem with their body, they would go to a doctor and get an X-ray and try and see what was going wrong within their system. We do the same with cities. So we take an X-ray and we try and see where there are certain kind of challenges within the urban system, taking this systemic approach. So if we see that there's a lot of waste that's being generated, we try and ask why. If we see there's not much being recycled, we try and ask why. And we try and, through this mapping out of these material flows, we can have a more systemic perspective to see potentially some upstream solutions can have downstream consequences as well. So changing the way that we design buildings, for example, can change the amount and quality of waste that's coming out at the end of their life. So through this, we identify certain circular opportunities for a particular sector as well. Then from those circular opportunities, the question then goes, which circular approaches can deliver the best results for each opportunity? So this is where we really dive in and get creative with circular strategies. And again, this is a bit of a funneling exercise. So from the left to the right, we look at the impacts that have been highlighted through this urban metabolism analysis. We look at the global trends. We see what's happening in the world. Maybe it's an influx in different construction materials, such as wooden construction and mass timber. We then combine it with the local activities that are happening within a particular city to see where that energy is, to see where that innovation is happening. And then through this synthesis, we come up with practical strategies that can deliver results within a particular city. So just taking an example of one of the opportunities that we found for the city of Prague, one of the hotspots was looking at households. So we found that over 300,000 tons of consumer goods are wasted each year in Prague, which is a huge amount. And only a third of them were being separately collected. So there was a huge amount of waste that was being generated from the city of Prague. So one of the strategies that we identified together with the city was looking at the concept of developing circular reuse hubs to really be able to have a space where people can, similar to this Blue City example that I showed earlier, having this ecosystem where there could be reused products, but also the upcycling and sharing of different products as well. So there's really hotspots of circularity within the city. And this would go towards reducing material consumption, but also providing innovation opportunities and opportunities for entrepreneurs within the city to be able to develop new circular business models and products, providing training and providing a space for community within the city as well as new revenue. Another example within Prague, again, was we identified this huge stream of organic waste that was being generated by the city that wasn't being collected. It wasn't being collected separately, it was being incinerated primarily. So this was a huge loss of resources that was being wasted with a huge amount of potential. So one of the ideas that came out as a result of the scan was capturing this waste biomass and converting it and processing it into a biofuel, compressed natural gas, bio-CNG. And with this gas, we identified that approximately 7 million cubic meters of biomethane could be produced by this food waste that was being wasted within the city at the moment. And only 60% of that 7 million was enough to power the entire waste collection fleet of the city as well. And through that, there's other social benefits that can come through this in terms of a quieter fleet with less air pollution as well. So from the identification of certain circular strategies, then we would really get down to implementing it. We don't want to just leave it in this high level inspiration. We want to really drive these projects towards implementation. And the question is, how can we implement and scale circular pilot projects? So what we do is the final phase of the scan. We worked with this local community of businesses, but also city change makers, and we developed these action plans to really identify the certain stakeholders that are required, which roles different stakeholders need, and convene them around these projects to get them off the ground and start implementing and testing these circular solutions. So this is a nice picture just at the end. This is the closing of our Circular Prague project with this community, or a selection of the community that we had developed these pilot projects with. Now, since 2050, we've worked with over 20 different cities around the world, and we've helped to implement, I think it's more close to 200 circular pilot projects now, going from, for example, in Prague, as I just mentioned, this biomass to bio-CNG that they're currently still implementing now. Into Glasgow, there was a pilot project that was looping waste bread and using the waste bread and creating beer from this waste bread. Then, obviously, being based in Amsterdam, we've had a huge amount of success with the pilot projects that have been supported through the city's innovation programs, but then also other cities as well. So I just want to leave on kind of a reflection going towards a circular future as well, and what it can mean in some of the practical steps. And I think collaboration is crucial, and from our work with cities, it's really underscored the importance of an ecosystem, of not just the city working with the city, but through the scan process, we work with cities and business representatives and bring them together under one roof to talk about these circular solutions, to see what's possible. But also, this action in the local level needs to be supported. It needs to be driven by more international, national and international levels as well, to give that mandate to cities. So this collaboration is really, really crucial to understand the needs and the requirements and give them the motivation for each of the parties involved. Now, what we're also doing as circular economies, we want to scale and empower this, this work. So what we're doing at the moment is we're digitizing this scan process and creating a digital tool, which is online at the moment, to be able to lower the threshold so that different urban change makers from around the world can use data and insights to then identify certain circular opportunities for their particular city, to be able to enable it to become more resilient and healthy and green. So if anyone's interested, you can have a look, and we have global databases of waste and material flows for, I think, well, I can't remember exactly, I think maybe 4,000 cities around the world as well are covered by this tool. But then we also, this scan and this X-ray of our global system, or our urban systems, can also be applied at different scales as well. So looking at the national and global scales, we look at these resource flows, and we do these circularity gap reports. So we understand just how circular a particular nation is, but we also look at how circular the globe is, and that refers back to the 8.6% circular that I mentioned at the beginning of our slide. We look at the resource flows and the metabolism of our system through a similar means to be able to really pinpoint some of the structural and systemic challenges that we have as a global system as well. And that kind of concludes the presentation. I'll be really excited to answer some questions. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Max. Really exciting presentation. And we do have many questions coming, but first one would come from myself. And I'm grateful that you have used example of Prague for your main practical slides, because, well, Prague is basically the closest city to Kiev among all those analyzed by you and that you were working with, closest not only in terms of distance, but also in terms of culture and a little bit the past. My question would be, what kind of challenges did you have in Prague? Maybe you had something that we should count when we develop such a project with you, probably, but definitely, what kind of challenges did you face, maybe with data collection, with formation of community of change makers, with motivating people?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, of course, every city will come with its own challenges. So there's a few that I can highlight in Prague, and you mentioned about data. So obviously, within this material flow analysis, it underscores the importance of data to be able to paint this picture. So what we use within this material flow analysis is a combination of more top-down data from national or international levels that we scale down to a city, but then we also support it with bottom-up data from the city itself, but also from businesses. And in Prague, as well as many other cities around the world, there's often this lack of really granular data, that it's a bit of a black box, especially if you go into the waste system. It's a bit of a black box that there's less publicly available data, especially in private companies as well. So it's really an exercise in understanding which players are in the system as well, and being able to reach out to certain businesses, if it's not at the city scale, certain businesses, to be able to kind of understand certain elements of that system and create this as good as possible, this picture of resource flows within the city. But I think also in relation to the bringing people along on the journey, that is a very interesting reflection that when we started the project within Prague, current perceptions of the circular economy were still maybe grounded more in resource efficiency and just recycling and end-of-life solutions. And it was I guess you can frame it as a challenge, but it was also, it's our day-to-day business, and it's an exciting challenge for us to be able to broaden people's understanding about what we mean by the circular economy in terms of a bit more of a systemic solution as well. So encouraging people to think more of the front of life, or the upstream interventions that we can have, and how they have downstream consequences as well. So from the start to the end of the project, you can see a complete transformation in people's perceptions of what the circular economy is, and that it's very much more interconnected as well. So it's a challenge, and I think as a reflection from Prague, comparing it with maybe Amsterdam, which is has been on this journey for maybe a little bit longer, it's different starting points, but it's all part of that journey, that different cities have different starting points, and it's all part of understanding and layering on that information and meeting them where they are.
Yeah, thank you very much. We do understand what you mean by those challenges. But then, literally, if you want to discover what is inside of that black box, what was and who was the driver and the pushing element for the process to actually move? Was it the city authority that was like coming to private waste companies and saying like, okay, guys, you have to discover this data to these guys because we are on an important and long and holistic journey? Or yeah, they said, okay, you can go to them and ask yourself. If they refuse, then, well, bad luck, and that's it.
Yeah, so in the example of Prague, it was a bit more of the second, a bit more of the latter, that we had a really amazing local partner who's based, an organization called Incien, who's based within Prague itself. And that's really important for us in the way that we work, because at Circular Economy, obviously we're based in the Netherlands. We have a bit more of the methodology, but we don't necessarily have all of the contextual and the networks in every location. So we really have to partner and tap into all of these amazing experience of local organizations. So we really relied on that local organization to be able to understand who to talk to, which businesses to talk to, and understand and being very well connected, both in terms of the public sphere, but also the private sphere, to be able to talk to the right businesses. For example, construction companies that were able to show from their kind of more localized resource and waste characteristics, but then also in terms of the city authority and being able to look into the statistics office and really dive a little bit deeper and tap into their resources as well.
All right. Thanks so much. We do have many questions still. Okay. It comes from Valentin. How to cope with low level of circular consciousness within community members? All this consumes a huge amount of energy if to be implemented with people that do not feel the need.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. And I think one reflection that we always have is that circularity is often, and I was speaking to them recently, that circularity is something that's very more in the head, and it's very analytically focused, and it makes sense in more of a kind of conceptual way. But on the day-to-day, it doesn't always relate and resonate with people in their kind of lived experiences. So it's really changing the narrative to something that's a bit more relatable. If you're talking about the need for, or the other kind of broader benefits of circularity. So in terms of if it's a bit more of a business focus, it's looking at the innovation and really showing that there's new forms of design and really making it kind of sexy and not just something that we're cleaning up the waste, but it's actually a driver of innovation. But then if it's other forms of people who are more focused on community and that community engagement, then you can frame it in relation to ideas about the sharing economy, to be able to forge these links between community and kind of rekindle this this maybe lose or declining community spirit as well, to be able to have that different benefit of the circular economy. So I think it needs to be kind of met in different spaces and kind of tailored. And I think that's one of the strengths of the circular economy, that it's a bit of a malleable concept. I mean, it has a lot of benefits and it can support a lot of different priorities as well. Yeah. So I think it's very much kind of tailoring how you speak about the circular economy to a particular audience, let's say, depending on their focus.
Yeah, completely agree. The next one comes from Pong, asking, how do we get top manager involved in private company in a circular economy project?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's all about getting those people who can have decision-making ability around the table and getting that around. I think what's really great for the circular economy is this more of a mentality of piloting and testing, and that's what we try and embody within the scan, to maybe not going to make a kind of multi-million pound investment and very big kind of committal thing, but small pilot projects, small tests, small kind of low thresholds, just kind of a case in point, and then being able to measure and monitor that performance as well, just as more of a smaller scale. And that's what we try and do with the scan, to really go from a circular strategy as a big picture, but okay, where are we going to start? And it's taking people on that journey of, we're just going to start here, and if it works, great. If not, so be it. And we haven't kind of spent huge amounts of commitment within that as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And now in Kiev, we have many sites in the city where companies or the city is rebuilding some spaces, revitalizing factories and creating really cool environments for people. But what we always observe is that they are not preserving old structures, even if they are in a good shape. They are not reusing materials because it's very cheap to use virgin fossil materials and resources in this country. Do you think it's possible that construction companies start circular initiatives simply by circular consciousness and their perception in society, or pressure from society, or certain thoughts, and will completely neglect the difference in price for like using virgin materials on the one hand, and reusing or upcycling structures, because the difference is huge now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a really good question, and it's a good point. And at the end of the day, in the way that we're currently doing it, it's the system set up in such a way that it is so much cheaper to use kind of virgin material. I think I wouldn't completely rule it out, in that there's some value if you're reusing certain components, especially if they have a bit more cultural value and cultural significance. Then there's an inherent value that can be translated economically. So there is that value. However, I think, and it comes down to another reason why we work with cities, is that cities have this huge ability to shape the market demand. So through procurement, procurement is such a powerful tool for cities and public administrations to be able to shape the demands of the market, and be able to, for example, put certain criteria within their tendering. So if they're creating new buildings, maybe a certain percentage has to come from recycled materials. And it's through that. And so the city is then able to understand the kind of the longer term innovation potential in relation to that, that if you start stimulating that market, then things will get cheaper in the longer term. But it's really, the city has a really great role to be able to have that longer term perspective, maybe. As well as the cost, maybe shorter term costs may be cheaper, but longer term costs, more expensive rather. Shorter term costs might be more expensive, but longer term costs, if you're looking at the management of the building, might be cheaper. So it's taking a different perception of valuing a certain building and assessing certain tenders. Of course, that comes with its own complexities, and the way cities are usually structured is very departmental. And so this new way of perception is kind of crossing over different departments. So then you need to start thinking about getting all the different relevant departments around the table to discuss this longer term. But it does make economic sense if you take a longer perspective. But at the moment, we're very much siloed into short-term, lowest cost, here and now.
Yes,
so it's a bit of this mentality shift.
Thank you. Yeah, it's all about quick gain, I'm afraid. Now, next question goes from Theophil. How do you welcome... by the way, I'm not sure if it's a question to you, but then you can say so. How do you welcome the use of green bonds and green municipal bonds? If so, would you want a European Bank of Climate? I'm not sure if this bank exists already, or is it an idea? But anyway.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's less of what we focus on in our cities program in terms of using green bonds and this kind of financing. I think finance is a huge role to play, both in terms of the private market, but also in terms of public financing as well, to really understand how to unlock different sources of financing to support green and circular initiatives. Green bonds are one such case. I'm not overly familiar or too well versed in the nuances of green bonds as well. But I think there's a huge amount of work and something that we're recognizing as well of that understanding of how to unlock finances to be able to support such initiatives towards the longer term.
Yeah, super relevant for Kiev as well, but let's see. Question from Pierre from Paris. If we were to build circular villages, like eco-villages, what would be the main target for circularity, and would it be achievable for ordinary citizens? Okay, it's not about really cities, but still very popular topic also in Ukraine.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, the concept of the circularity is it has multiple scales that it can be applied in. So in terms of a village, that's very nice and easily conceptualized as an entity. You have that kind of space, but you can also have circularity. As I showed in the presentation, Blue City is just a building. So you can have circularity within that building, you can have circularity within a village, you can have circularity within a neighborhood. There's really some cool initiatives more in relation to energy, but these microgrids, so micro generation, and used within the same neighborhood in a district as well. And then of course you can have a circular city, much more of that kind of broader, larger scale. Cities must be understood in relation to their region as well. So the regional flows, especially when you're looking into food and agriculture, to have those flows linking between the urban and the rural, and then of course, national and global economies. It's an interesting point in terms of being accessible to a lot of people, because at the moment it is more expensive to have more circular options as well. And there's a risk of it being a bit more exclusive, only for people who have the funds and the time and the money to be able to do this. But I don't think it's inherent. I think there's a lot of awesome circular initiatives in terms of tool libraries and sharing libraries that really try to embed and embrace that element of access over ownership. However, it needs that concerted kind of effort to be able to bring it to a lot of people so that it's not just kind of a niche, kind of exclusive concept. So I think circularity has the promise and the potential to be able to be inclusive, but it's not guaranteed, let's say.
Yeah, not for now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, we are more or less done now with timing. However, I would ask the one final question. It's very Ukrainian, I'm sorry to say, but what do you think about skyscrapers in the city, and how can we build so that we still see the horizons? Because in the past we were all obsessed with those Western movies where we could see skyscrapers, and we thought, wow, that's so cool to have. And yeah, people in Kiev are now dreaming of skyscraper neighborhood next to the water in the almost central part of the city, and it's a bit, well, on the one hand it's understandable, taking the generation they are coming from. On the other hand, it's a bit sad, but I tend to think that the problem is not in a skyscraper itself, because you also have skyscrapers in Amsterdam, for example, at Zuid, but yeah, my perception is that it depends what's around and how do you design it and how do you manage it and what kind of demand for resources and mobility and all kinds of flows you are creating. But what's your opinion about skyscrapers in the city and how to see the horizon?
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with your comment about seeing skyscrapers in relation to kind of the wider services that are around. That, yeah, I mean, if it was just a skyscraper with no services, kind of like in these almost financial districts, which aren't very nice to live in because it's kind of very monofunctional, then it doesn't inspire as a really healthy, thriving place to live. I think what's quite interesting, I'm not kind of too off pro or con skyscrapers. I think what's interesting is a reflection on the decisions that we make in a certain time, i.e. whether we do build skyscrapers or not have repercussions for however 50, 100 years. So if you make a decision now of building a skyscraper, it's quite a tangible thing that, oh, we can't see the horizon. But it's also in relation to the resources that we're locking into the building as well. That if you do it in terms of very linear ways that you then have to destroy the whole building to when you want to remove it, then that's that lock-in that you're having. However, if you design it in such a way that you can disassemble, or maybe even a modular approach, which can then be reused, these components can be reused, then you have a bit more of an adaptable space to play with, and it can be a bit more adaptable to the kind of changing future demands as well. So less on skyscrapers, yes or no, but I think it's a good reflection and analogy on the lock-in that we're kind of going into in a linear system.
Right. Thank you so much, Max. We still, well, dear participants, we still have about 40 questions that, or maybe more that come from you. And we are thankful for such attention, for such attitude. We have agreed with Max that we will answer the most relevant questions by mail, and you will get answers together with the recording of this webinar to your mailbox. Hopefully next week, but we will see. Thank you for registering. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Max, for participation. I hope that we will be able to implement a circular city project here in Kiev, maybe starting with a small pilot, but still would be very nice. And yeah, we wish you I'm not sure if we will have more webinars by Christmas time, so we wish you a happy Sinterklaas to those who are coming from the Netherlands. And yeah, Merry Christmas to all of you and stay safe. Thank you so much, Max.